Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, the second part thereof for the 9th of May 2025. This is a geopolitical update, and we're going to start with Hungary. I reported this morning, but there's been now a further development. So what did I originally report? That relations between Hungary and Ukraine plunged further as Ukraine's security service, this SBU, published details of Budapest agents working in the country. They say it's the first time in its history they exposed Hungary's military intelligence network in Ukraine. 2 Hungarian agents have been arrested. So these are ex-military spies, effectively, spies who are ex-military working in Zakarpattia region in the Carpathians in southwestern Ukraine near the Hungarian border, where there's quite a lot of Hungarian communities or communities of Hungarian descent. Kiev says Hungary spies were told to collect info about military security of Transcarpathia, which borders Hungary. They also probed vulnerabilities in ground and air defense, quizzing locals on reactions if Hungarian troops were to enter there, I presume. The supervisor was a staff member of Hungary's military intelligence. Well, so that happened this morning, and that caused quite a big ruckus. Tim White then further says later, getting its excuses and reactions in early to deflect the unwelcome attention ahead, Hungary has expelled 2 Ukrainian diplomats. Its foreign minister, Peter Shihado, says, quote, "We expelled 2 spies who worked under diplomatic cover at the Ukrainian embassy in Budapest." So that's a kind of typical response there. But I would presume it's somewhat less justifiable than the Ukrainian initial action of, catching 2 Hungarian spies working in Ukraine. It would be interesting to see how this develops. This is not good for Hungarian-Ukrainian relations, which are already strained as it is. Now, going across to the victory parade, this is Lula da Silva, the Brazilian leader, being a little bit too friendly with Trump, I have to say, with the Russian ribbon there as well. Not a big fan of this interaction at all. But there you go. Okay, but it's wanting to go into Putin for a hug, and then again wanting more, loving it. So the Brazilian leader, I think, really showing you all you need to know about his ideology or his sympathies when it comes to the Ukrainian war, or the war in Ukraine, sorry. Not cool at all. And then you have these 2 clowns, Vučić and Fico, the Serbian and Slovakian leaders, meeting eventually, because Fico, it took ages for him to get there. It took a long time for Vučić to get there as well. Had to be grounded in Azerbaijan, I believe, in Baku. Robert Fico and Alexander Vučić recorded a video in Moscow holding hands and saying how happy they were and to be in love in Moscow. And it was a beautiful thing. And they hope to have a penthouse suite together. Both had trouble getting to Moscow as Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia closed their airspace for flights headed to the parade in Russia. If you're listening to this, they didn't say that about the penthouse suite. I'm joking. They are not really lovers, but it kind of looks like it from that very cringy video. Okay, the UK will impose its largest set of sanctions, by all accounts, on at least 100 oil tankers, or around about 100 oil tankers from Russia's shadow fleet, and I think on other entities as well, used to circumvent restrictions on the sale of Russian oil. This is a really big move, and Keir Starmer was pretty straight up about this when he announced it on the socials, saying all the right things with regard to Russia. There's no doubt in European minds, most of the European nations, notwithstanding Serbia, Slovakia and Hungary, but there's no doubt in most of the other nations' minds that Russia are the bad guys, and our leaders are happy to say that. Just something that is missing, I think, from the United States at the moment. Leaders of 20 out of 27 of the European EU countries, have expressed support for the creation of a tribunal to prosecute Russia's leadership, according to Reuters. This is something that has been on the cards. I think there's stuff been done about this before. Tim White was saying he thought this had already been signed, sealed and delivered type thing. Europe is throwing support behind Ukraine, a special tribunal to prosecute Russia. So there is there is this move to look at the war crimes of Russia and to hold them accountable for the aggression towards Ukraine. I don't know if it's crimes against humanity, but the EU is going to formally put that into motion. European Parliament also passes a resolution demanding return of Ukrainian children abducted by Russia. Lawmakers urge the EU and its member states to step up efforts to hold Moscow accountable through international courts and support for Ukraine's campaign to bring its children home. So that's good news. Moving on, we have Kaja Kallas and many foreign ministers I think there was 35 foreign ministers were in Ukraine today in Lviv to commemorate sort of VE Day and Victory Day in the same way as Russia is doing that in Moscow. There were many in Lviv, and Kaja Kallas was there. She commented on the creation of the special tribunal for Russia's crimes against Ukraine. Also criticised Robert Fico for attending the Moscow parade. Absolutely right, she did that, stating he's on the wrong side of history. Let's listen to a bit of Kaja Kallas.
It is unnecessary deaths, this is unnecessary suffering, and we really need to bring those people to justice who have decided to start this war. And therefore we are starting this special tribunal for aggression. Today we have a political endorsement for this. We have done the technical parts and preparations, and this is very important because without justice you can't have peace.
Do you believe it's possible?
Yes, I do believe it's possible because every such big crisis we need to develop the international law further. We have the UN Charter that says that one cannot attack another country, territorial integrity, sovereignty, independence of another country. But there has to be accountability. What happens if somebody does in order to prevent this also in the future? So it's not only about Ukraine, it's much broader that we wouldn't have wars in the world.
What do you think about
And that's a really good point, actually. So the problem with the UN is that, yeah, you can set these rules out, these guides out in the UN Charter and whatnot. But yeah, okay, so what? What happens if a country completely, flagrantly, breaks those rules and invades another sovereign country? Well, everyone stands around and looks at each other uncomfortably. Okay, well, we need to develop the law in terms of dealing with these situations when they arise.
What about Fico being in Moscow?
I really can't understand. I would say that all those who are supporting, freedom, independence, all the European values should today on the European Day be in Ukraine rather than in Moscow. And I can tell, standing side by side with the guy who has started this war, with all these unnecessary deaths, with all these people suffering of innocent people. How can you stand side by side with this guy? You are on the wrong side of history.
Really good to hear that from Kaja Kallas. And obviously she can't go too far because, Slovakian leader, or Slovakia as a country, is in the EU. But I mean, I'd love to be in her position. Just go to town on Robert Fico, just absolutely taking him to the cleaners in a very public way. But there you go. Dutch Prime Minister Dick Schoof warns within 2 to 3 years Russia could rebuild forces near Europe's north to start another war. Speaking in Oslo, he stresses there's no need for fear, but Europe must stay resilient and prepared. Wise words as well. Now, Anton Gerashchenko reports on the new German Foreign Minister, Johann Wadephul, arriving on his first visit to the Ukrainian city of Lviv, again with all of the other foreign ministers and dignitaries to the aforementioned ceremony, where an informal meeting of EU foreign ministers is scheduled for today. Also, EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs Kaja Kallas announced that during that visit, a political decision would be adopted to establish, as mentioned, the International Tribunal for crime of aggression against Ukraine, commonly referred to as a tribunal for Putin and other top Russian officials. Noted that the announcement would be made today regarding the allocation of €1 billion to support Ukraine's defence industry. So that's coming from the frozen Russian assets and then being used to support the defence industry, so being spent on Ukrainian defense production, which is really good news. Now, the German foreign minister said, "Good evening, it's about 11 p.m. and I've arrived in Ukraine for the first time as foreign minister. Why? Because together with my colleagues from other EU countries, I want to show that we stand by Ukraine's side. The European Union is a place of hope, a refuge for many people here in Ukraine who hope that this country will one day be able to join. Germany will support this. We are an organisation that stands up for security and order in Europe. That is also a core element of my foreign policy. We must pursue a security-oriented foreign policy, and that is why it is important that together we'll send a signal of solidarity to Ukraine tomorrow. We will be there on Europe Day to show that solidarity works and that we will stand together and not let this Russian aggression happen." Meanwhile, Robert Fico and Alexander Vucic are in, and indeed all the other, Xi Jinping and Lula, they're all over in Russia, rubbing shoulders with a dictator and a genocidal narcissist. Now, Friedrich Merz, words and languages, the new Chancellor for Germany, or of Germany, has arrived in Brussels for the first time as Chancellor and immediately put Putin on the spot. The German Chancellor has threatened Russia with sanctions if peace talks fail. According to him, Russia should finally agree to a long ceasefire, which would make it possible to conclude a real peace treaty. He's holding talks with the EU and NATO representatives. Let's go through what he had to say. His words were, I spoke on the phone with the American president. He informed me of his plan for a 30-day ceasefire. I expressed my support for this to be the right course of action from the perspective of Russia in particular. Is now called upon to finally agree to a longer ceasefire that must allow space for a genuine, for a true peace treaty. So that's Merz. Now we're going to go to Romania, where, just to remind you, there was the first round of the presidential elections. Remember, they were initially cancelled, annulled, because Russia had been seen to interfere too much in that. And there was this chap, Karlin Georgescu, who was then banned from running again. Now you've had this guy, George Simeon, who's basically of the same sort of mould. He's a former football hooligan, sits very much on the right and is appealing to nationalists, and he got 40.9% of the vote, which was about double the next person in the list, who he then ends up debating here on television last night, a guy called Nicolas Dan, who is a mayor. Now he is he's been accused, I'm talking about Simeon here, being accused of bribing voters. I think 40,000 people signed up to getting €30,000 houses if they voted for him, type thing. And it's all falling apart a little bit for him. I think the hope is that people who don't want this kind of person to be in charge, to be the president, there's a hope that they will coalesce and actually he won't pick up too many more votes than the 40%. Because, of course, he only needs like 9.5% or whatever it is, 9.2% of the rest of the votes or the whole votes to switch to him, to shove him over 50% in that second round. And that's not particularly difficult, right? Or it shouldn't be, but hopefully it might be, from my hopeful position, the idea is that he's topped out that kind of extreme vote, and that even though he only needs relatively small number of other votes to win the second round, actually he might struggle to get that because he's kind of topped out that portion of the spectrum, and actually he's too disliked otherwise to get the votes. Well, he's said that he's demanding Ukraine repay aid, including repayment for the Patriot that has gone from Romania to Ukraine. He's a leader of the far-right AUR party. He called on Ukraine to compensate Bucharest for its military and humanitarian aid. Now, the leading candidate in Romania's presidential election promises not to provide military aid to Ukraine, says no reports. George Simeon stated he would not personally vote for aid for Kyiv, but would follow any decisions, interestingly, made by Trump. And this we'll hear this in a second in the debate. I mean, he is basically he effectively is genuflecting to Trump, seeing Trump as the guidance for him on these matters. He justified his stance by claiming that Ukraine, quote, does not respect the rights of the Romanian minority, which is, of course, the same sort of thing we've heard from the Hungarians and Viktor Orban with those people in Zakarpattia region. We have our issues with Ukrainians because they act much like Russians. Okay, so the title there of this article is right-wing Romanian election favourite says he wouldn't send military aid to Ukraine. But he was in a debate last night with Nicholas Dan on TV, and it didn't go well. So the pro-Russian George Simeon is debating, said Derek Tanis at the time, the pro-EU Nicholas Dan right now, and it's one hell of a debate to watch. Not only did Simeon just melt his lead today, but I think he might have just lost the elections. For non-Romanian speakers that are curious, there's a news website live texting the debate, so you can go and see that. It depends how interested in these things you are, but this is important. But Adrian P., another Romanian source I go to, said in tonight's Romanian presidential debate between pro-European mathematics professor Nicholas Dan and pro-Russian and literal football hooligan George Simeon, the pro-Russian got absolutely wrecked and savaged. Unprepared, chaotic, contradicting himself, almost finally admitting he's gay, which would be fine if he weren't a MAGA clone. And all this on, so I don't know what went on there, all this on the background of a spooked financial market of the prospect of him being president. So there's been loads of issues with investors getting out of Romania and certain things tanking monetarily, and people being very worried about the prospect of George Simeon being president. Now the Romanian people, says Adrian P., must see that this clown is completely unqualified for the job. So that's really good news from our point of view, is that he tanked it in a debate. Akesh Maniam here says Romania has a remarkably easy choice for president. Either choose Dan, who understands the need to rearm and back Ukraine, or Simeon, who can barely string a coherent sentence together and can't see past Trump and Putin. The election really shouldn't be close, but so far it's looking like it has been and will be. Now I'm going to go through just a little bit of what they say on Ukraine here, which has been usefully excerpted. So this is Nicholas Dan, pro-Ukrainian, pro-EU guy that's running. Romania and Moldova's security depends, he says, crucially on how the war in Ukraine will end. I wish the war in Ukraine, in which Russia is the aggressor, to end with a just peace that suits Ukraine. Otherwise, we are giving way to further regional tensions. I mean, all this is absolutely bang on. No problem with that at all. Without question, I say yes to Romania's participation in the EU's rearmament program. And to be fair, balanced negotiations so that part of the money Europe spends on armament is brought to Romania, supporting the country's military production capabilities and contributing to Romania's economic development. That's a really good point that we talk about this all the time, right? But I don't think it's mentioned explicitly enough. And yeah, it does sound like you're big upping the military industrial complex, but in this context, actually, if you're going to support Ukraine with arms, then you might as well support your economy as well. So that's what Nicholas Dan had to say, and then it goes over to George Simeon, who said, "My country is Romania. And I will vote in accordance with the interests of the Romanian nation." So he's really leaning into the kind of nationalism here. I will vote only in accordance with, I know that's a pretty normal thing to say, but understand what's going on here, and that's getting people, flag wavers, getting all clappy in the audience. I will vote only in accordance with the interests of the Romanian nation and without prioritizing other states. I love my country, and I think Romanian school children, farmers and pensioners must have priority, which is, that's your isolationism, going inwards. I'm going to look after these people. I'm not going to bother about people outside the borders. Okay, yeah, I can understand that. But of course, helping people outside the borders is in your own national security interests. And it's really super bloody important. Our position, he says, towards Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. So he admits that's a good point, a good concession. It shouldn't be a concession, but anyway, which has already lasted for 3 years and is leading nowhere, is neutrality, not escalation, not feeding with weapons, he said, and perfect alignment with the policies of, wait for it, the Trump administration. So he's basically saying we should just do what Trump says, and if Trump says jump, we say how high. For defence, we have NATO and not the EU, he finishes. The EU has other tasks and not security. But I just find it really interesting. Our position towards Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, he says, is neutrality, not escalation, not feeding with weapons, and perfect alignment with the policies of the Trump administration. And there you go. That's why I keep talking about this right-wing populist ecosystem being, it's this echo chamber of all the same sort of people, and MAGA Trumpism is there. Like, you might not like it, Americans that listen to this going, "Oh, stop continuing to insult Trump and our administration." Yeah, but when you have like the worst of these political candidates in say, for example, Romania, but you could also say Germany with the AfD saying, "Yeah, we're big fans of Trump and Vance and Musk and whatnot," then you've got to be wondering whether you're on the right side, type thing. Right, moving on. We have, we're going to return to the Raiffeisen Bank, isn't it? This is the Austrian bank that has been operating in Russia still and has been a bargaining chip in negotiations concerning Austria. And they've wanted it taken off like the blacklist. And they've been like, right, we're not going to support Ukraine. We're going to kind of vote against aid or whatever unless you take this bank off the blacklist. And there's been this ironic twist here where, according to Kirilo Shevchenko, Russia has forcibly confiscated 1.87 billion euros from Raiffeisen's bank account, nearly half of its post-2022 profits in Russia, due to capital controls. This was done by the decision of the Kremlin-controlled courts. On the contrary, EU can't confiscate more than 200 billion euros in Russian frozen assets because of the legal struggle. Yes, Russia still can't use them, but it's not the same. In today's Russia, your assets are only safe until they're politically useful. Expropriation under legal cover is the new normal in a weaponized economy. Now, there's several things to take from this. I mean, one, hopefully this is a bit of a punishment to Raiffeisen for their continued support of Russia or continued business in Russia. But also, and it's a sign for anyone else that's operating in Russia too, but also it does show that Russia can get hold. Well, it shows two things. One, Russia's desperate for money. It wouldn't be doing that. It wouldn't be confiscating 1.87 billion euros unless it really bloody needed it. But the flip side is that they are able to get hold of that as well, which is a real kick in the teeth. Like, it would be great if they couldn't get hold of $1.87 billion, because now they've suddenly got $1.87 billion that they can use to support their war effort. So that's a real shame that they've done that. But it does also show that they are in a spot of bother. Now, as I mentioned this morning, Zelensky had a conversation with Trump on the phone last night where he talked about particularly the 30-day ceasefire, and then pretty much straight away afterwards Trump came out and said there should be a 30-day ceasefire. So I talked about how the recency bias for Trump, I think, is particularly poignant at the moment. President Trump's demands for an immediate, unconditional 30-day ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine has been, well, he's stated it on Truth Social, and yeah, so that's out there. And it's interesting that Trump is kind of listening to Zelensky, I think, more. Hopefully the relationship is at least somewhat better than it was at the time where he's kicked out of the White House. But at the same time, the US is doing weird things like discussing the potential revival of Russian gas exports to Europe, which is odd because you'd think the US would want to sell LNG into Europe. So I don't understand this. I wonder if this is individuals, because I know one of the people involved with this, I forget his name, but this is, I think, at the behest of a particular American business entity person who is associated with the Trump ecosystem, if you like. And it could be that, individuals stand to gain, whereas the US doesn't stand to gain so much from this. And I wonder if there's a tension there. I mean, that's a lot of speculation from myself. So, understand that. Because from an American geopolitical, military, economic, strategic point of view, this doesn't make any sense. Why would you want, as a producer yourself of hydrocarbons, as the US is, and, even if you are kind of like more pro-Russian than pro-Ukraine. If you're transactionalist, as Trump is, then you're not going to want Russia to make lots of money, right? You still, like, even if you don't want Ukraine to prevail, you don't want Russia to be a major competitor with the US. So I don't understand why you'd be like, yeah, we want to open this so Russia can make lots of money. And of course, yeah, okay, the understanding would probably be that the US is going to take a cut in that somehow, I would presume then. But, you know, Trump was a guy that was saying, yeah, I was dead against Nord Stream. And then here he is, seemingly involved in trying to get Gazprom back onto good terms with the EU and Europe. It seems like crazy. Anyway, Washington's involvement may also help mitigate political opposition in Europe while giving the US strategic visibility over future Russian energy flows, sources told Russia. I don't know. It seems weird to me. Right, Andriy Yermak from the President's Office, Ukraine, met online with Keith Kellogg and Stephen Witkoff to discuss pressure on Russia. There's been a slight change of tone, hasn't there, where, you know, Vance and Trump are saying that, you know, Russia are far away at the moment from their peace deal, from a peace negotiation being successful, and that Russia are asking too much. And then Trump keeps saying, I'm going to have to make a decision soon, but I'm not going to like it. But essentially intimating that they are going to have to come down hard on Russia at some point. But then they keep talking about walking away if things get tough. But anyway, Yermak talking with Kellogg and Witkoff about pressure on Russia. Head of President's Office held online talks with the US and European officials to discuss implementing a complete 30-day ceasefire as well with Russia. So, you know, there are conversations taking place. Resolution of support. Now, we're going slightly left field here, and we're going to talk about Denmark and Greenland a little bit, but this is French aid to Ukraine, quoting from... I'm not sure which source this is, but anyway, a resolution to support Denmark and Greenland and to work towards greater defence cooperation was unanimously adopted by the National Assembly's Foreign Affairs Committee. The support, quote, could take the form of a military presence, as is the case, for example, in Estonia with the deployment of French forces. In other words, the French, and we'd heard rumours about this, might deploy French forces, armed forces, to Greenland. But today, the privileged relationship with the United States is being brutally challenged by the new American president. Donald Trump's repeated statements directly aimed at demanding the acquisition of Greenland, a territory belonging to the Kingdom of Denmark, a member of the European Union, clearly mark a significant turning point and a profound rupture. By attacking Denmark's sovereignty and the Greenlanders' right to self-determination, the President of the United States is not only threatening a European partner, he is testing Europe's solidarity, cohesion, and ability to defend its fundamental principles. He is also, to some extent, jeopardizing the collective security architecture that we have potentially built with our allies in favor of a logic of confrontation and power struggles. So, the French are talking very much about what's going on with Greenland and Denmark, and keeping that on the agenda, and possibly even thinking about putting troops into Greenland. Interesting. Now, there's been this controversy because the other day at one of these meetings, it was in Czechia when, and I almost reported this, but I didn't. It was kind of like, and now this type moment. And finally, one of the Czechian contingents at the meeting with Zelensky and his team, and you know, he went to Czechia for 2 days and met with Petr Fiala and Petr Pavel, the Prime Minister and President there, and etc., etc. This Czech diplomat or Czech politician had these socks on that showed the Kremlin on fire, right? And this caused the right ruckus. Someone took a picture of them, and it's caused a bit of political blowback. So Czech official socks depicting a burning Kremlin spark outrage in Russia. And yeah, here Euromaidan Press reports on this. The Czech politician outraged Russians with his socks at the meeting with Zelensky. Kopechny has said they've been, quote, bombarding Ukrainian cities for 4 years, but get upset over socks. I wish they showed the same sensitivities to cities where they cause exactly this. Boom, drop the mic. Thank you very much, Czech politician. Awesome. And finally, this is a proper and finally. So we know that Elon Musk is not the soup du jour, the flavour of the week for many, particularly on the Democrat side in the United States, with many people calling Musk a fascist and being up in arms about Elon Musk and therefore Tesla as a pet peeve amongst many people. You know, people who were previously very supportive of Tesla. You know, Tesla appealed mainly to people on the political left. Then what Elon Musk has been doing is just biting the hand that feeds him. And now Tesla sales have absolutely slumped. Well, in preparation for VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, 98-year-old British World War II veteran has crushed the Tesla car with what looks to be a Sherman tank there. Condemning Musk for supporting fascism. We defeated fascism once, we'll do it again. So I'm going to leave you with this just because.
My name is Ken Turner and I'm 98 years old and I've served in the British Army in World War II, as did this Sherman tank. I'm old enough to have seen fascism the first time around. Now it's coming back. Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, is using his immense power to support the far right in Europe. And his money comes from Tesla cars. Well, I've got this message from Mr. Musk. We've crushed fascism before, and we'll crush it again. So let's go, shall we? Let's go.
Bloody brilliant. Love it. Love it. Makes you realise how big tanks really are, doesn't it, when you put it next to a car? Typical led by donkey stuff, that. It's brilliant, and a nice bit of the Great Escape at the end. Fantastic theme tune, that being. Right, I just thought I'd throw that one in there. Take care, y'all, and speak to you soon. Don't forget that the Car for Ukraine fundraiser is still going. Please check out... Oops, no. Oh, what's going on there? Please check out the video I did earlier, because there's a nice little video that the guy that's in charge of the unit, the Seraphims unit that we're fundraising a truck for, actually sent us a video and put it and mentioned all the names of people who had donated to the first car, and that was absolutely fabulous. Really loved it. So go and check out that video earlier. And I've just seen this. We have moved into third place, past Georgi from Ukraine Matters. Well done, guys. We are only £1,610 away, euros away. This is amazing. There's been some serious movement today. Thank you very much to the people who have helped out today. Britta Jew Anderson, David Freakley, absolutely brilliant. Debbie Anderson, Axel Grammersdorf, mentioned as you were, Axel, on the video by the Seraphims chap. Michael Lamming, Egon Fredrickson, again, Egon, you were on that video too. Michael Lamming, thanks so much for your support. A bunch of other people as well with some significant numbers there, but no names. If you want your name appended to this, then just reach out to Car for Ukraine on the contact form. So thank you. This is incredible. We are almost there. Really appreciate that. Anyway, in the meantime, take care. I'll speak to you soon.